Chairman. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to this special Strategy and Resources Committee meeting on Tuesday, the 24th of November 2020. My name is Councillor Richard Siddle and I am the Chairman of the committee. This meeting is held under new regulations which came into effect on the 4th of April in response to the COVID-19 situation. And there are just a few housekeeping issues to run through. First of all, please could I ask everyone present in this meeting to ensure your microphones remain muted and your video feed off when you're not addressing the committee. This will reduce background noises and avoid any unintentional disturbances. This meeting is being held remotely, streamed live and recorded. And by being present in the meeting, you are giving your consent to be recorded. Members and officers during each item, please use the chat function of the meeting to indicate if you wish to speak. I will then invite you at the appropriate time. Members are reminded that apart from indicating you wish to speak or that you have to leave the meeting, the chat function should not be used for questions of any other purpose. Please do not use the raise hand function as this is not available on all members' devices. When speaking and referring to the agenda papers, please ensure you reference a page number or paragraph. And lastly, if members need to leave the meeting at any point, please do make this known and use the chat function to signify that you need to leave the meeting. Now, if I may ask officers taking part in the meeting to introduce themselves, starting with Mr. Leslie.
Good evening, Chris Leslie, Director of Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Leslie. Mr. Dodson.
Good evening, members. Paul Dodson, Director of Strategy, Performance and Governance.
Thank you, Mr. Dodson. Mr. Holmes.
Good evening, Chairman. Richard Holmes, Director of Service Delivery.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes. Mr. Hulley.
Good evening, Chairman. I'm Grant Hulley. I'm Lead ICT Specialist.
Thank you, Mr. Hulley. Mr. Lee.
Chairman. Oh, thank you, Chairman. Sorry, the one click. I'm Matt Lee, Lead Specialist Place and Chief Planning Officer at Morton District Council.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Mr. Howson.
Good evening, Chairman. I'm Tim Howson. I'm the Council's Conservation and Heritage Specialist.
Thank you, Mr. Howson. Mrs. Longman.
Good evening, Chairman. I'm Jackie Longman, the Strategy Theme Lead for Place.
Thank you, Mrs. Longman. Mr. Butcher.
Good evening, Chair. I'm Stephen Butcher, Commercial Manager.
And Miss Holmes or Miss Holmes?
Good evening, Chair. I'm Emma Holmes. I'm the Lead Specialist Legal.
And Miss Bird.
Good evening, Chairman. Good evening, members. Tara Bird, Committee Services Officer. Thank you.
Are there any other officers at the present that I've missed, Miss Bird?
Chairman, I believe we've got Matthew Winslow with us tonight.
Oh, okay.
I think I saw him join.
Mr. Winslow?
Hello, Chairman. My name's Matt Winslow. I am the Strategy, Policy and Communications Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Winslow. Tara, please can you carry out a roll call of members to confirm who is in attendance? Thank you.
Thank you, members. If you just indicate when I call your name, please. Starting with Councillor Mrs. Channer, please.
Hello, just put my better, isn't it? Probably.
Yeah, that's much better.
Good evening, Miss Bird. Good evening, officers. Good evening, members.
Good evening. Thank you, Councillor Durham.
Thank you, Miss Bird. I'm present and correct. Good evening, Chairman. Evening, members. Evening, officers. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
Good evening, all present.
Thank you. Councillor Helm.
Present, Tara.
Thank you very much. Councillor Lagan.
Yeah, very good evening, everybody. I'm present, Tara.
Thank you very much. Councillor Siddle's present. Councillor Skeens, please. I don't think he's here, Chairman. Councillor Stamp.
Good evening, Chairman. Good evening, members and officers. I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Swain.
Yes, good evening. Here.
Councillor Mrs Thompson.
Good evening, everyone. Yes, I'm present. Thank you, Tara.
Councillor Miss White.
Miss Bird, Chairman, Miss White's works, so I think she might be on her way like the other evening, could be late, but if not, then can apologies be given?
Of course, thank you very much. And then members, could I ask any other members in attendance, please, to just introduce themselves? Thank you.
Good evening, Tara. Councillor Carly Mays.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, everybody. Morris.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. Thank you, Chairman. That finishes the roll call.
Thank you very much. So we now come to agenda item number 2, which is apologies for absence. And as far as I understand, we have no formal of apologies. Is that correct, Tara?
That's correct, Chairman, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. So item number 3 on the agenda is to disclose the existence and nature of any disposable pecuniary interests, other pecuniary interests or non-pecuniary interests relating to items of business on the agenda, having regard to paragraphs 6 to 8, inclusive of the Code of Conduct for members. Members are reminded that they are also required to disclose any such interests as soon as they become aware, should the needs arise throughout the meeting. If any member has an interest to declare, please choose the chat function now to indicate, and I will invite you to speak. And we have Councillor Durham.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I have a non-pecuniary interest as a member of Essex County Council because there are various items pertaining to that authority. I also have an other pecuniary interest in relation to item, where are we? In relation to the item regarding Wood and Walter and the heritage assets. Excuse me. My parents own one of the properties, but there's no pecuniary element, so I will remain for that part of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Durham. And Councillor Channer.
Thank you, Chairman. Same as well, not exactly the same as Councillor Durham, because nothing to do with my parents having a property. Non-pecuniary in that I'm also a member of Essex County Council, and Essex County Council is referred to actually in a fair number of reports, or many reports might have a connection with Essex County Council, but I can't see any pecuniary involvement, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Channer. Councillor Stamp.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Skeens has just said that he will try to join later. Something's happened and he apologises, but he will log on as soon as he can, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Can you note that, Miss Bird?
Yes, of course, Chairman. Noted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tara, is there anybody else who's declared an interest?
No, Chairman. No one's wishing to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Tara. So item number 4 on the agenda is public participation. I can advise that we have not received any submission from members of the public. So we now move to agenda item number 5, which is IT policies, found on pages 5 to 16. Members are reminded that if you wish to speak on this item, please make this known by using the chat function within this meeting. I will then come to you in turn. Please keep your points clear and succinct. Mr. Hulley, please present the report.
Thank you, Chairman. So following the Strategy and Resources Committee meeting from, I believe, just over a month ago now, we've succeeded in adding in additional statements for the acceptable use policy and information security policy pertaining to members. Essentially, this boils down to 2 paragraphs. In the information security policy, there is the addition of a members area for roles and responsibilities, which correlates to that of employees. Essentially, it's conducting their business in accordance with this policy and taking responsibility for formalising themselves with this policy and understanding the obligations in place on it. And then under acceptable use policy, there is now an additional paragraph which has been added with input from myself as lead ICT specialist, as well as Emma Holmes and Simon Quelch as legal advice. Essentially, it explains that under the systems from Malvern District Council, if monitoring is required, for example, a member or staff member for that matter would be made aware, and that's within a given month of that monitoring and its requirements. Again, this is outside of the assumption that the police may make a request as well, or something of a legal nature. But yes, the additions have been made as per the previous Strategy and Resources Committee meeting, and hopefully we're here to now get this approved and put into policy.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Holly. So the recommendation as set out in the report is as follows: that the policies appendices 1 to 3, which set out the security requirements that all staff and members must adhere to when using Malvern IT systems to ensure data security and appropriate use, be reviewed and agreed. This will also address the required audit recommendation. If any member wishes to second that motion, please turn on your video, unmute your microphone and state your name now.
Second.
Thank you, Councillor Swain. Thank you, Councillor Swain. I will now invite members to make any comments on the report, and I think I have Councillor Lagan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just want to get the relevant page up, so just excuse me for 1 second. Mr. Hulley mentioned that the monitoring paragraph, which is on page 8 of the document, it talks about the right to examine the system and the device in the course of business to inspect any data. It doesn't really say that it was in the set period of time. There is a set period of time for that monitoring to be made available, and it's probably me not reading it and undertaking it in the way that it is. But it doesn't actually say that there will be notification made to the individual member or person being monitored, and that concerns me in a certain respect. For on page 12 of the document, where it mentions about the human rights, that it mentions that because you have the human rights within that, and let me just grab this here for you, Human Rights Act 1998, but Article 8, it talks about the digital correspondence set of work gives individuals the right to privacy, such as communication. There's monitoring for certain types of things. Are we 100% aligned and convinced that monitoring would only be undertaken if any information that was sent fell into that criteria, where it was of a legal nature, or as it says down here, national security? Because it just sits a little bit uncomfortably to me that we can monitor without letting people know, and there under the Human Rights Act we can say no to monitoring. So they're the only things in the whole document that sit a little bit confusing to me. So if we could just have that confirmation that they would be the only reasons, then I'd be happy to support.
Mr. Hulley.
Thank you, Chairman. For this particular one, and considering that it's of a legal nature, I may have to hand over to Emma Holmes, if that's okay.
Okay.
She will cover the legal side in this regard. Thank you.
Emma, do you have any information for us?
Yeah, certainly. In relation to accessing emails, there would be, if a request was made, there would be a balancing act, which I think is what that section is talking about, in terms of a member's right to privacy against the public interest in accessing that information. So it's often easier with these to give examples than try to make a general statement. But for example, if there was a criminal investigation of a serious nature, your right to privacy would be overridden by the need for that prosecution and to look at that. And if a request was made, and I have to say I don't think we've had any knowledge of any even requests, that would be looked at on a case-by-case basis. So in the majority of cases there would have to be that legal threshold of your right to privacy would have to be overridden by the need to see that information, and we'd look at that on a case-by-case basis.
Okay. Councillor Lagan, are you happy with the answer?
I am. I just wondered if a supplementary through you, Chair, whether that could have explicitly added into the policy, so it's really clear on page 8 that that's what it says, because it's not implicit in that statement that is on page 8 about monitoring, and it doesn't really refer to page 12. I don't have a problem being monitored for that type of reason at all. I think is a very strong and very right thing to do, but just for ease of use and clarity, I think I would prefer that. But that's just a question to put out there for other members. If they agree, then we agree with that. If we don't, then we'll go with it.
Okay.
But personally, I'd like to see that. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Stamp.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I agree with Councillor Lagan. I also highlighted that paragraph. I did note that Mr. Hulley said it was to include the members now. I believe this was debated some time ago and members raised some very, very legitimate concerns. I'm sure they have been addressed, but I also too would like to, if Councillor Lagan wants to propose that amendment, I will support that amendment. I know I have been told, Chairman, it's pretty standard policy everywhere. That may well be, but I totally agree with what Miss Emma Holmes has said, but I would like it in writing that they are the reasons and the exclusions or inclusions for it, Chairman. I'm not happy with the way it is worded there, and if we could agree to that, I think that would be fantastic. Also, Chairman, I do notice about social media, etc., and I've just made a couple of comments really, Chairman. Social media isn't always negative. Social media can be positive. So we do have to be careful we're not going to be too prescriptive and nailing everything down. I understand where the report is possibly coming from, but I'm also a great believer, as long as it isn't actually, what's the word, causing any distress or legal implications for what's been posted. I totally support it. But I don't want us to be too prescriptive that we do stop the element of debate and what we can actually put on social media. As I've said, it can be used in a positive way, and I think many members of this council have used it in a positive way. I certainly have, and promote Malden District Council as I did Burnham Town Council. So they're my comments. Thank you. I don't think there needs to be a response, Chairman, unless other members do wish to support our recommended amendment or not. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Stamp. Councillor Chunner.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Firstly, can I just take the liberty of asking this? Councillor White's texted me and emailed me. She's having trouble getting in. There's some problem with her lines, and she's trying the mobile Wi-Fi is not working on the iPad, and she doesn't have a Wi-Fi tonight. Could someone send her a telephone number to ring in on? Is that possible, Chairman? I'm sorry about that, but I've just got the message come up, so I said I'd ask when I was going to speak on this item. Can I just say the points Councillor Lagan's raised actually, and sort of large as well, I guess, Councillor Stamp. Actually, I think when it did come up at the last committee meeting, I'm pretty sure that I myself did make reference to the fact that if anyone was looking at my emails for whatever reason, then I'd like to be informed. And I've got a feeling that was stated, and I'm not so sure that it wasn't sort of minuted to that effect, not necessarily declaring my name, but I certainly did say that I'd want to know. And also, I'm not sure that what it does cover, bearing in mind I'm a data controller, as we all are, and I appreciate the council is, if my emails are monitored at any one time, the reason I would like to know is because obviously I have a lot of confidential information from residents on there, or residents coming to me personally, and I don't distribute necessarily all those emails. And hence, therefore, I'm not quite clear, and perhaps it does, can the officer confirm that the sort of passing on of information does cover that aspect where someone in IT, and it's nothing personal against IT, so I don't think that. I'm just trying to get this clear in my head, that if someone from IT is monitoring my emails and they see stuff of confidential nature, giving names, addresses of residents, that's not passed on either, and it's forgotten. So I'd just like that qualified, Chairman. And there was one particular point where, and I'm sorry, perhaps I missed it, but I have read this document twice, and I'm not quite sure of this paragraph that covers the members, because what I did pick up on a particular page, I'm just going to get it was Appendix 2, page 5 of the document, but I think page 13 on the order paper, and it is about actually abusive sort of emails we might receive from wherever, not necessarily, you know, public, could be elsewhere. And it says that tell your line manager. I'm not sure that actually relates to members. So I'd just like some clarity on that, because, you know, we may receive abusive emails or making statements we consider offensive, abusive. And if that's the case, we don't have line managers as such. What's our best reporting route? Is it the monitoring officer, our group leaders, or directors? Because I think obviously members can receive such things. We might see emails where it's widely spread or whatever. And I think we need to be protected when we are receiving all these abusive emails. If we did, you know, I appreciate sometimes residents get frustrated and write stuff, but you know, just like to know about that, because that seems to refer to officers only and managers being advised.
Okay, thank you, Councillor.
Chairman.
Mrs. Holmes or Mr. Hulley, would you like to answer those questions?
Thank you, Chairman. I'll come in for some of this. So just whilst Emma's looking at the document as well, she's just working out some wording for us. Just to cover or sort of go through the control mechanism here. Essentially, when a data request is made, that request has to be formalized and formally delivered to, for example, myself or one of my team as IT from a director of Malden District Council. When that request is made, the information that is gathered isn't necessarily read by an ICT specialist. It would be collated and put into a document for the eyes of that requesting director only. The director then has control over what happens to that information. That information, for example, might need to go to the police if it's that type of request, or it may be that the director views that information and says, actually, there's nothing to worry about, and shuts the case down. It's a controlled method of access. It isn't just jump in and look for the sake of it. We need very specific requests and controls in place to make sure a request can take place for any data access.
Which director would it go to, Mr. Hulley?
Again, it can be any one of the three directors. That's
Right.
for redundancy, to make sure that someone can cater to the request if required.
And that would relate to members. If a member had something around Councillor Channer was talking about, one of the directors would look at that.
So we have an additional document here. So this was, I'll just pull it up as well. Members' use of IT systems. This was again written by Emma Holmes and very kindly, I believe, circulated. I hope it has been. This goes into further detail, but essentially, as I say, it's controlled access. We can't, for example, receive even a freedom of information request without first going through a director to allow for that information to be passed out or given out to anywhere else.
Okay.
So yes.
Thank you, Mr. Hulley. Mrs. Holmes, are you ready to come back, or shall I go to Councillor Stamp?
No, I can. I've hearing a couple of the comments in terms of the wording. I think we can probably add a sentence onto the policy in relation to the Human Rights Act, that section that says about monitoring individuals. I'm thinking something as simple as emails will only be accessed where this legal justification can be met. So if I take you, it's page 12, and it's got the heading Human Rights Act, and then you've got a paragraph that says, however, monitoring individuals' email and digital correspondence at work may be justified if it was in accordance with the law. So I'm suggesting somewhere at the end of that paragraph to add the line, emails will only be accessed where this legal justification can be met, and hopefully if that would assist members in hopefully easing their fears and their concerns. Yeah.
Okay. Do I have I don't think we need to amend the recommendation for that to happen. As Ms. Holmes is saying that she's prepared to make that amendment. Are members satisfied that we can move on to the vote?
I'd like to just come back, Chairman, and just say that Councillor Durham very kindly helped me because I couldn't think of my word. I've had meetings since 9 o'clock this morning, so I do apologise, and I thank Councillor Durham. The word I was looking for was defamatory. So obviously, if it's something illegal, defamatory, exactly or can cause somebody great heartache or whatever. Defamatory is a very good word. So that's what I meant to say. I totally agree with the recommendation now. Thank you, Councillor Siddle.
Okay. So in terms of the vote, are we prepared to take assent for this, or do we need a recorded vote? Councillor Lagan, you want a secondary?
Yeah, sorry, it's not a secondary. I'll just say, Emma, thanks for that. That's exactly what I want. But can we also add into that that members will be informed at this stage of the initial inquiry? So, or the email user will be informed immediately at this stage of the initial inquiry, because then everything is transparent then. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Ms. Holmes, are you happy with that?
I have a slight concern with that. Only thinking in hypothetical situations is that if the police asked us to make and gave us a formal request to access information, and it was in relation to a serious crime, they may ask us not to pass that information on. So putting that statement in there, I would be slightly uncomfortable. We could add something along in most circumstances, something like that, to cover us for those situations. If that would probably ease my fears, because there may be, and I think it would be very rare, I'm not aware of it, but I wouldn't want to tie us in. So I could certainly add something, unless in exceptional circumstances, the email user will be notified within a calendar month or something along those lines. So yeah, we can certainly add that.
Thank you, Ms. Holmes. Councillor Chandler, is this a new question?
Yes, Chairman, it is.
Okay.
Chairman, regarding the recommendation and for this committee to agree, could I just say that under the terms of reference of the committee, actually, as this is a policy document, which I think has got corporate significance, should this perhaps be a recommendation to council and not one that this committee can agree? And I'm referring to the terms of reference of the committee, Chairman. So I just make that inquiry. I think, is this not a document, bearing in mind it is a policy document covering officers and members of this authority, that it should actually therefore go to council for agreement, and that it should be a recommendation, not a resolve of the committee.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Ms. Holmes, you should be able to answer that question for me. Or Mr. Dodson.
I'm just pulling up the term.
Yeah, happy to. That is correct. That should be that it's a recommendation to council.
Okay.
I would understand.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Dodson. In terms of this recommendation, we are now agreeing the recommendation that we put forward the recommendation for the policy to full council to agree that. Can we do that via assent, or do we need a recorded vote?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much.
Chairman, sorry, just to confirm, subject to those amendments, yes?
Yes, correct.
Thank you very much.
So we now move on to agenda item number 6, which is planning enforcement, found on pages 17 to 74. Members are reminded that if you wish to speak on this item, please make this known by using the chat function within this meeting. I will then come to you in turn. Please keep your points clear and succinct. Mr. Lee, please present the report.
Thank you, Chairman. Members will be aware from the report that in July at full council, Councillor Hurd raised a query in relation to planning enforcement and outstanding investigations, and it was agreed that the leader at the time, Councillor Hurd, along with the chairs of the various planning committees, would meet with officers to discuss this matter. At this meeting, it was agreed that a number of points would be looked into in relation to trying to reduce the backlog and expedite the enforcement process. One of the key ones is the production of a new planning enforcement policy. As members will be aware, let me start again. As members are aware, it is discretionary for the council to undertake enforcement action, but that is materially different to it being discretionary for the council to undertake a thorough and appropriate investigation of alleged breach of planning control. And that's a slight technicality which sometimes is overlooked in the wording, but that is explained in the officer's report. One of the ways to come to a correct and robust decision on the expediency of taking enforcement is to have an up-to-date policy. So officers have reviewed the policy that was attached to Appendix 1, which is the existing policy, and considered ways of improving it, streamlining it, and looking to expedite the process, particularly in relation to people trying to slow the process down through negotiation, or looking to submit planning applications when it's a development that the council thinks it's unlikely to support and that conditions wouldn't overcome harm. With that in mind, Appendix 2 attaches the proposed policy. As members will be able to see, it hasn't been done with track changes or anything like that, which is normally the way we look to do things like that in planning when we've done amendments policy, because it is such substantially different that wouldn't have worked. But section 3.3 provides a list of sort of the headlines of the major changes.
Unknown participant is now joining.
Councillor Swain, could you please turn your mic off? Thank you.
And
someone else is just.
But yeah, as I said, that's section. Sorry, Chairman. The section 3.3 covers all the main changes, and obviously recommend that the policy is recommended to full council for adoption. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. So the recommendations as set out in the report are as follows: that the Planning Enforcement Policy Appendix 2 is recommended for adoption to full council. Little 2, that members note the inclusion within the 2021-22 budget cycle growth requests the provision of additional staffing resources. If any member wishes to second that motion, please turn on your video, unmute your microphone and state your name now.
Councillor Lagan, seconded.
Thank you, Councillor Lagan. Thank you. I'll now invite members to make any comments on the report. And I think we have Councillor Channer, is that right, Ms. Bird?
Yes, Chairman, that's right.
Okay, Councillor Channer.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Mr. Lee actually referred to an area where it defines really where the issues are. And it is, Chairman, I think it's on page 19, 3.3.3, and it says about setting new performance targets. And in the document, I was just wondering, should that be something that the committee performance, governance and audit should consider as well, bearing in mind they are involved in the performance of service delivery, and enforcement is very much that case. Also, Chairman, regarding the appendix, page 33, there's a flow chart which shows the flow of what happens in cases, and it seems to end on planning contraventions. What I was a bit concerned with, Chairman, and it was 7.2 on page 37, I think, it said regarding policies agreed and action approved under powers delegated directors of planning resources, Mr. Dodson that be, or through relevant committee councillors' involvement according to council's constitution at times. I'm just a bit concerned by that, because we used to have a policy, and it was quite clear, and I couldn't see it anywhere within this appendix, whereby ward members, before an enforcement notice was issued, they would receive it and be asked for comments on it. I can't remember the last time I got one in my ward, and I'm a bit concerned, bearing in mind the flow chart ends on page 33 just to do with the planning contravention notice. And then I was hoping to find another flow chart where it showed you the other stages which went on, which is including the enforcement notice sort of being served. So I felt there was a bit of incompleteness there, Chairman, if I'm honest. But I would like this matter of ward members, because we were very much involved. And also, bearing in mind something else it referred to about committees, relevant committees. Well, we've recently agreed that enforcement reports won't go to committees. And I think that might just be the month-long ones. So can I have some clarification on that? Are we saying, if appropriate, then a committee will receive a report on an enforcement notice being served? Because 7.2 paragraph, as I've just said on page 37, doesn't really imply that to me. But I'm very concerned about members. And what I'd like to know actually is, I've got, I think it might have been useful, or perhaps we could have it, or it might be PGA. I'd like to know very much within my ward the number of enforcement notices that have been served, because I can't remember really the last time that I was ever asked to give a view on one.
Okay.
I'm sorry, that's a complex question, Chairman, but that all actually all areas do have synergies with each other. That's why I've encompassed it in just one question.
Mr. Lee, did you get the questions from Councillor Channer?
I'll do my best as always, Chairman. If I've missed anything, I'm sure Councillor Channer can flag it up to me. I think there's well, firstly, I think one of the things that maybe I didn't explain, I'm not sure if the report really goes into, one of the decisions to undertake is that the old policy wasn't just a policy, it also included our internal process, our practice, guidance, etc. And that made it quite excessive. It was a big document that wasn't to the point. And so one of the things is that the appendix
Councillor
2,
White, could you please mute?
Appendix 2, which is the new policy, only is about the policy. So things such as internal processes and practices are silent on this document because that it's a different approach. And obviously, the point that Councillor Channer was saying about this flow chart and obviously, making reference to presentation at committees or old job titles, that's because that was actually in relation to the old policy, the one that's currently in situ, rather than the one that we're proposing that members recommend for adoption. To my knowledge, members are still being consulted before we take enforcement action. I know recently, I think we served a temporary stop notice and the board members were informed of that. But I can't off the cuff comment on each particular case on that has or hasn't been. But if I'm happy to get officers to confirm to Councillor Channer if there have been any enforcement notices served in her ward within the last 6 months, and if but I can't obviously comment on specifics.
No, of course.
I hope that's answered the questions.
Councillor
The big
Channer?
issue, yeah, sorry, just to clarify, the big issue is that Councillor Channer's asking questions about the old policy rather than the new policy.
Right. Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Channer, did you wanted to come back?
Yes, please, Chairman, if I may. And I don't want to sort of drag this out too much, but I'm sorry, I'm a bit confused because that might be the old policy that you say I'm referring to, but 7.2, page 37 says policies agreed and action approved under powers delegated to Director of Planning, Resources, etc., or whatever the title of Mr. Dodson is, or through relevant committees, councillors' involvement according to council constitution at the time. So I was expecting to see clearly defined in the policy about members would be consulted before the serving of enforcement notice. If it's in the old policy, then okay, why hasn't that been carried over into this new one? Because I think we should. And actually, it is probably for PGA to actually have a whole list of all members' wards where enforcement notices have been served and see the numbers that did get sort of passed on to members before they were actually served. I'm not saying they might not have been, there might not be that many, but I don't think this policy covers that aspect I've highlighted, Chairman. So I'm just keen to make sure that this policy doesn't remove the requirement for members to be consulted before the serving of an enforcement notice.
Mr. Lee, has that ever been the case? Because I don't remember that in the time that I've been a councillor.
Through you, Chairman. As I said, paragraph that Councillor Channer's referring to is in the existing policy, and as that ties that into the Constitution, which is obviously separate to the policy, and that overrides it. They sit side by side, so the requirements of that will be done. That is a slightly separate matter to what our enforcement policy is. It's a bit like you don't have our scheme of delegation in the local plan. They're separate matters. So, and this is just literally looking at like a local plan for planning enforcement, and then the scheme of delegation is our constitution. But to my knowledge, we are consulting ward members before serving enforcement notice. As members are aware, we discussed this. Obviously, there will be new members of the committee. We discussed this last time at full council when enforcement came up as the query, and there obviously had to be a hiatus, for want of a better phrase, during the pandemic and lockdown, because we wouldn't been able to serve an enforcement notice because they wouldn't actually been able to comply with it, because they wouldn't have been able to get builders in and all the rest of it. So there has been a legacy where we haven't really, been able to be that proactive. But I'm happy to get an update for members if the committee wishes that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lee. Councillor Stamp.
Thank you, Chairman. Just for the benefit of all the members of public who'll be watching at the moment, can I ask Mr. Lee if he would just, if I give him an example to say what category of urgent or non-urgent enforcement would come under? And I'm glad he's actually just used the term a temporary stop notice was issued, because this is what I think members of the public and the perception of enforcement when it directly affects them want to know what Malden District Council are going to do for them. And I'll use an example of something that happened recently in Burnham, and that was
breach any confidentiality.
Well, no, I don't think it will, actually. Okay. It was all over social media, and please jump in on Mr. Lee to stop me if I'm going to get myself
I would just say that there are, if it's an ongoing enforcement case, if it's an ongoing enforcement case, Councillor Stamp, I won't be able to comment because it will be confidential.
Yeah. Well, can I give you an example rather than a particular one? So say, for example... Generic, thank you. I've a lot of help tonight, so I appreciate that. So say, for example, you're sitting in your garden and you've been having constant noise from a development site near you, and it's been going on from 6 a.m. till 10 p.m. and you've seen something which has concerned you. They're outside work in their hours they should be. What category of enforcement does that go into? Is it a 15-day, a 25-day? Is it what? Because I know for a fact, and I think other members may back me up on this, that is what we get a lot of complaints about. Is that fair, Mr. Lee? Does that come under enforcement? Because you said temporary stop notice, and I would think that's what that would come under. Thank you, Mr. Lee.
Well, I think there's two different things there. One is whether or not the breach would be classed as what category, and I don't think in most instances that would fall within the urgent class rather than the higher one, which is obviously immediate, which literally relates to things where it's going to be a lost asset, such as a listed building or a tree, or if there is, real risk to life or health. The second point about whether or not it warrant a temporary stop notice is very hard to comment on. It needs to be assessed on the expediency and what government guidance is, and temporary stop notices are quite a draconian tool and we shouldn't be using them lightly, and there is obviously a financial risk to the council if we do use them, so I can't really comment on that per se, but the example Councillor Stamp would use I would assume would fall within the urgent case, and which would be 15 days for first site visit. But I think that's part of what this policy is to do, I think it's not, if I'm honest, it's not the class that they fall within, which is the thing that the members of the public are maybe raising concerns with. It's how long it takes from raising that complaint to it being resolved. And the point is that this policy firstly looks to expedite the process, but it does also bring in a target which we've never had before in relation to cases being, we didn't use the word dealt with, but then that's up to the point where we're going to serve an enforcement notice or the point where an application has been approved. It doesn't mean the breach will have ceased, because if we serve a enforcement notice, there'll be a compliance period. They always appeal, so that will then could take a year. So there's now a target for us to deal with cases in the period that we can control. So and that's something that hasn't existed before. So I think this is quite it's a very big change to what we've had before. It's not as friendly as in, it is much more moving cases forward, and obviously there is an impact on the person that's breaching the control in respect of that, but I think it has there is much more of an impact and a better impact on the people that are subject and are being impacted upon by the breach of planning control. So hopefully members will understand that and support the policy change. Thank you, Chairman.
Stamp.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Lee. I think that's really important. You passed a lot of information over to members of the public who are watching this meeting, as I'm sure they all are. And I actually thank you for explaining it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Swain.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. First of all, if I can refer to the point that Councillor Chandler was making. Yes, as I understand it, detailed information on enforcements won't go to area planning committees, but they would be posted somewhere else for as a point of reference. But in this case, I think there should be some regular reporting, and I would like to see a quarterly report, which probably would go to PG&A, in a broad sense, covering the categories of complaint and with details of what the council's responses have been on the issues of currently under review. That I would like to put as an additional recommendation. I would also like to make a general observation. We're told that we must investigate where there's an enforcement complaint, but we don't have to go in for enforcement. We're told that we can act if it's considered expedient. And in 3.2.6 it says in most cases it's not illegal to breach planning controls. There's no obligation for people to cooperate. There's a large discretionary area here, and this seems to me, I'm quite a bit uneasy about the whole situation. Either under the regulations, the planning officers have a almost quasi-judicial role, or we're saying that the final arbiters on whether something is an important matter of planning lies with the magistrates and the courts. I'm not sure about the lawfulness of the whole system.
Ms. Lee, can you answer any of those questions for Councillor Swain?
I can do my best, Chairman. So, through you, Chairman. I don't think I comment on the lawfulness of the whole planning system. It's been going a while, so no one's challenged its fundamental lawfulness. I think that's pretty secure. I think obviously the document is written with a certain assumption of levels of knowledge, so I might need to row back and just explain a little bit more. When, in most instances, breaching a planning control is not illegal. The idea is that it's a member of public, they're unaware of the planning system, they've maybe stumbled or it's minor, etc. That's sort of the understanding of why it's not illegal. That differ with adverts because it's a commercial enterprise that has undertaken that, but also with things such as listed building and trees, because there's a very fine limited asset, and if they were to be destroyed or lost, there's a much immediate harm. But otherwise, pretty much all of planning control is not illegal until the council serves a notice. So it could be an enforcement notice, temporary stop notice, breach condition notice. And once they're bitten, once they're in place, undertaking works on. So if it was a breach condition notice that said you only can open within your opening hours and then you open later than that, that's illegal. If we served a enforcement notice that said you've got to knock down your extension within 6 months and you don't, that becomes illegal. So that is separate to whether or not, you know, the expediency of taking action. The expediency of taking action is there harm? So if somebody could build a 3-metre extension there on their house without needing planning permission, there's no neighbours around, and they build it at 3.2 metres, you may think, well, actually, we would grant this planning permission, we put no conditions on it, so there is no benefit, for want of a better word, for anybody to actually take action. Why make them remove it for 0.2 of a metre when, you know, it's not hurting anyone, for a better phrase? And that's basically the expediency test. Is there harm or not? If there is harm, then the council does take action. You know, we publicised recently that breach of condition notice where we prosecuted a gentleman. You know, members are aware of that. You know, a few years ago, we actually made somebody demolish a whole bungalow because they'd built it without permission. We do take action when it is considered expediency. So I hope members, one of the reasons we have a backlog is because we don't just, you know, fairly flippantly decide they're not expedient, take action and close the cases. So I hope actually that backlog supports members' understanding that we're not trying to just ignore breaches of planning control and not take action. But as I said, that is separate to the magistrate's point, which is only when there has been an illegal activity. So there's a number of, and that's where the time spent is officers negotiating and trying to resolve the breach. Then we'll serve a notice and then they'll appeal that. So that's normally a couple of years happens of work before you end up in court, actually. So hopefully that's sort of answer Councillor Swain's question. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Councillor Swain?
Yes, I won't pursue the lawfulness aspect, but okay. Perhaps I can come back with a recommendation, because I think some sort of reporting on the state of enforcement and what progress is being made, and particularly how many are treated as in those different categories of urgent or not so urgent or whatever, that are under review, and that a regular report in fairly general terms should be made, so that we can keep track of the performance of the enforcement team.
Okay, Mr. Lee, could that be put into the document, an amendment to the document rather than an amendment to the recommendations?
I'm not sure. I don't think it would be for the document because it is a policy rather than.
Right.
I think that may be something that might need to recommend. I don't know if Mr. Dodson or Miss Holmes can answer that better. I'm not. That's slightly out of my comfort zone. But yeah, thank you, Chairman.
Okay, Mr. Holmes and Mr. Dodson, do we need to put an additional recommendation that a report is sent to one of the committees at a set period? Would that be an additional recommendation?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, that's fine. We can. Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, we're happy. We can accommodate that request.
Okay, so we'll add that as an additional recommendation when we get to that part of this item on the agenda. I have seen the notes about Councillor White. I am taking people in order, and the next person in terms of wanting to speak was Councillor Lagan.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just be quite brief. I've learned in my time as a member that planning is rather complex, and I'm pleased we've got such proficient officers. As Matt said, it's a policy document, and as a policy document, you can't get down in the weeds with it. So I think that what Councillor Channer actually said has great validity. Maybe adding in somewhere that explicitly says that in circumstances of notices being issued, that ward members would be notified. Because I think that, as Councillor Channer alluded to, and Matt, you've clarified this as well. These sort of appeals and processes are long, they're expensive, they're emotionally draining. So I think the policy in itself is pretty strong, and I appreciate the development of it. So I just wanted to note that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lang. I apologise, Councillor Dunn. I will now come to you next.
That's all right. Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, just in terms of the chat. Sorry. Yeah. No, that's all right. Chairman, I think just a point of information. I mean, we're the reason that originally one of the reasons that we wanted the officers to alert us to enforcement or potential enforcement was not because we were precious about wanting to know everything happening in our wards, but there are occasions where we might have other information that might provide the officers with an answer which may save everybody a whole lot of time and grief. So yeah, it's not that we were being dictatorial and wanting to know absolutely everything. And of course, in many cases, that's actually the member ourselves that are lodging the enforcement, identifying the issues that may or may not lead to enforcement. I can safely say that sometimes we are alerted, sometimes we're not. Mr. Lee, yes, he did alert me to a temporary stop notice that he issued, and which was very, very, very welcome by myself and the parish council. But that actually was probably a result of me plaguing his life for about a fortnight and the officers. The other thing I'd like to raise, which is gives members some difficulties, particularly when at parish councils, when we get because enforcement is, let's face it, one of the things that parish councils get very excited about. And we get the reports, which are, of course, watermark confidential. And it sometimes puts members in a difficult position where we know through reading our reports about the state of an enforcement case. But because it's watermark confidential, we're not actually allowed to tell the parish council. And I haven't got an answer to that, but I just wanted to float that out and see what you or the officers thought about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lee.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. I don't know if I said before the mic came on. I think it's an interesting point. If I'm honest, at the previous authorities I've worked at, members haven't had a report like that about enforcement. So that was a moot point there. There was no information before members to actually discuss. But, I think it is appropriate that the cases are confidential. There is obviously potential that if information was to get out into the wider public, it could prejudice our ability to take action. But also, I think you've got to remember that a lot of the cases we find there aren't breaches of planning control as well. And I think for those individuals, we need to protect them and to ensure that they aren't, unfairly marked, especially as sometimes investigations can take a while. But I do understand members' frustrations, but I know it's something we've looked at before, and it's always had back that it does need to remain confidential. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
Chairman, and I totally agree that they should remain confidential. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lee.
Thank you, Councillor Dunn. Councillor White. Apparently, if you press 6, Councillor White, you'll come off mute, from what I understand. Just bear with. *6, apparently. If you try that, Councillor White. Doesn't seem to be working for her. Councillor Thompson will hopefully, as you ask a question, Councillor White will be able to come off mute.
Thank you. Yes, perhaps if I can slot in while we wait for Councillor White. I'm looking. It might be in the document, and I apologise if it is and I've missed it. And it's probably a question through you for Mr. Lee, but my parish council certainly believe they should be given updates on enforcement. It certainly was written in the policy at some point, but the difficulty is it's confidential, and I agree that's as it should be. So I don't know quite what there could be that we could update them with. But there was one parish council in particular, although most of the councils are different people now, that said, well, why aren't we getting a report? Well, could Mr. Lee enlighten us through you, please?
Mr. Lee.
Thank you, Chairman. We do update parishes when they are the people that have raised the complaint, just like we do anybody else who has raised a complaint. I do know some parishes feel that they should be kept in the loop, for want of a better phrase, of every complaint in their parish, but once again, it's confidential, and second, obviously that would be a lot of officer time potentially to deal with matters, because we'd have to actually provide them with an update of even what the breach was in some instances where they're not even aware of it. I think the bigger issue is actually, it's not that, and this isn't just for parishes, this is generally for complaints, it's actually the time that's taken for an investigation. So the time between being able to make a reasonable and update of any value is quite extensive. And that's one of the problems where people are playing the planning system, for want of a better phrase, where they're manipulating and slowing it down. So we've ended up in negotiations for 8 months. So we haven't told a complainant anything because there isn't anything to tell them. The whole point of this report is to actually, or this new policy is to shrink that process. So we will still be making updates to councillors if they're the people that have raised the complaint, parishes, whoever it is. But hopefully now this will mean that it will ensure that it's much quicker, so people shouldn't be complaining because they should be getting these updates quicker. And as it says also in the report, we've looked at bringing in some standard templates as well that will go out as almost standard letters giving updates. So that should actually save officers time as well. So those two things together should hopefully make the perception of enforcement much better. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Thompson, you want to come back?
Yes, please. Again, through you, could I just ask what the updates consist of? Is it as each stage has been reached? I presume it doesn't contain any detail, or how much detail does it contain? Thank you.
Mr. Lee?
To be honest, it is a little bit of horses for through Chairman. Sorry, it's a little bit horses for courses, depending on what the breach is, what the information is, at what stage it is. So obviously, what we're looking to do is let the complainant know when a site visit has been undertaken, and predominantly what the outcome is, or when we've got to a stage that we're likely to taking action or coming to a resolution, or we've got a certain level of information. It is like, I'm hoping it should be a little bit more informed than previously, partly because it should be quicker. So there will be more information to be able to get to, rather than, sometimes we have touched base with complainants and it's been very little we've been able to inform them, because at the stage there is very little to say. So by shortening the whole process, hopefully we'll be able to give much better and quicker information. But it's not something I can give a definitive on what it will be in each instance, because it will very much depend on the breach. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lee.
Thank you, Chair. That's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Channer.
Hello, Chairman. Thank you very much. I think Councillor White says she might have sorted it now, so you might want to go back to her. So I won't. I was going to raise her point, but I'll let her do that if she can get in.
Okay, so
Chairman, I'm sorry to sort of go on about this point, and I hear what Mr. Lee said about this being a policy document. But my point was regarding the appendix, and specifically regarding the flow chart. The flow chart shows the process of what happens when we get the complaints, and it ends at the planning contravention. My point is, Chairman, after that, the process continues, and we may get down to the point of an enforcement notice being served. It seems to me that it's not complete. I was expecting to find part 2 of the flowing process. So if it's a policy document, but we can have part 1 shown by a flow diagram down to the planning contravention bit, why can't we then have the remainder of that, following that serving of the planning contravention notice, down to the point where some action, enforcement notice or whatever is taken, Chairman? Regarding the point also of enforcement and updates, and we agreed that those reports wouldn't go to main committees, I think bearing in mind there are new chairmen of committees, Chairman, and it was agreed that actually the area planning committees, the chairman of an area planning committee can seek to call a meeting solely, ideally in the daytime, because the more the team will be there, to hold a meeting to talk about enforcement only. That would include an update or members' questions, and then be able to go on to specific cases, because it would be a private meeting, Chairman. So I just make those points.
Okay, Mr. Lee, is there missing items from the flowchart, and can a area planning chairman call a meeting around enforcement?
Through you, Chairman. Obviously, I haven't made myself clear previously. The flowchart that Councillor Channer refers to on page 33 is what is included in Appendix 1, which is the current policy document, which is currently adopted. There is no flowchart in the new document, in the new policy, because this is not the flowchart doesn't relate to the policy, that relates to operational matters. So there is no flowchart in the new document, and to a certain extent, whether or not the flowchart in the old document is correct is a bit of an irrelevance to a certain sense. But
the policy is detailed in the new document in terms of how that process works.
Yeah, and in relation to the second point, Councillor Channer, she is perfectly correct. Members agreed to no longer have reports go to area committees, but in exchange, the chairman would be able to call meetings to discuss planning enforcement, which would include information. So, to you, Chairman, it's up to the committee to make a decision. But as Councillor Channer said, we've sort of already got something better than what's been proposed in the system. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Councillor White. We can hear you.
Oh, it's just told me I'm no longer muted. Right. Thank you for letting me into the meeting. I apologise for not being able to log in, but all of my alarms on my council iPad are set via Wi-Fi, and somebody kindly pulled all of our telephone wires down today. And in fact, I'm waiting for the BT man to come out. So that's why I didn't even know there was a meeting tonight. But right, firstly, I was never happy with the enforcement being removed from planning meetings, because that was when we actually raised several items with officers that actually brought forward enforcement issues that had just sort of stopped dead in the water. So I'm really concerned about that. Ostensibly, I'm okay with less info in the updates because some of it is duplicated, but we still need the updates and we still need them with where we are in the action. But my main concerns are that we don't know as members what's going on with these enforcement actions, because I've raised several and I've had to chase and chase and chase. And whereas we used to have officers who we could email and speak to about enforcement, now it just goes to enforcement, so we don't actually get to know anything. And I think without having the officers we can speak to, I would almost think it needs to go back to the planning meetings or have one meeting every 2 months purely for enforcement, because we have to be updated, because the main thing the parish councils, as Councillor Durham and Channer have said, get upset about is the enforcement. And I know several I've raised and I cannot get any information on them, and it doesn't actually say anything in the members' update. So that's one thing I would like to know where we are on it. The second thing is that I wonder if this should almost go to the working group to be reviewed, because I think it needs more detail. I can't print the agenda off tonight and I can't view it, but I did read it yesterday. And from what I remember, the flow chart ended and it didn't actually give all of the information that was required. And I'd like an answer on that one, because we need the information, and so far we're not getting the information. But if somebody could mute me now, that would be fantastic.
Thank you, Councillor White. Well, I think we've established that the flowchart covers part of the process, and then the policy details the rest of the process. So the process is there, but is not put in a flowchart form. The other thing we need to be clear about is that any lists and updates in terms of the information that's provided to members is for members and planning officers only, and should not be discussed at a parish council meeting. It's because
No, but from our point of view, if I might come back, Mr. Chairman, from our point of view, I never ever give details of what's going on, but I generally say, any issues are being investigated. But we now can't even find out if they actually are, because a lot of them stall, and at the old meetings we always used to bring them up and we'd get things reinvestigated, and often they'd come back and say, we'll look into this, and it doesn't get looked into. And
Okay.
That's my concern, is that's not in the policies, or I couldn't find it in the policies, where we're going forward from there, because the policy is one thing, but we need to be clear on the route that it takes. And for me, that's missing, and that's why I think it needs further scrutiny, because it is very important.
Okay, thank you, Councillor White. Apparently, if you do *6 yourself, you can unmute and mute yourself. So just to let you know that I've just been advised of that information.
Right, let's try it again. I've got the right screen up this time.
Okay, Mr. Lee.
Through you, Chairman. I think I can understand members' frustration and members' wants or needs in relation to information from the previous reports and what was done previously, but that was something that was agreed relatively recently by a separate committee. That's a separate matter to the planning enforcement policy. It's a similar matter, as I said earlier, about schema like looking at the plan application, it's the schema delegation to the LDP. This is just the LDP. The points on whether we have meetings to weekly, monthly, don't have them at all, is a separate matter to this policy, and I just want to make sure that members are conscious of that when discussing this. If and I said that was a matter that wasn't agreed that long ago by a separate committee, and I can't comment on that. Thank you.
So chairman of local planning committees can call meetings into enforcement if they so require, and and we have that.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, I would just like to raise, as an old member who's been around for a while, that this is just, for me, one level of democracy being removed, and we're not being kept updated. And as members, we need to know exactly what's going on.
Okay.
And that
Thank you, Councillor. Okay. So earlier we had a recommendation from Councillor Swain. Councillor Swain, could you specify that recommendation for us, please?
Thank you. Yes, Chairman. As a third one, I would say that a quarterly report be made to Performance Governance and Audit Committee detailing the categories of complaint and the nature of the Council's responses.
Okay, thank you. Can we have a seconder for that motion?
I'll second that, Chairman.
Councillor Stammer seconded it. Okay.
Yes,
Ms. Good, did you? Sorry.
Leave it fairly vague, because I'd leave it for PG&A to go into more detail if they wished.
Okay. Mr. Lee, did you want to come back?
Through Chairman, my only concern is in most instances, within a month of a complaint being received, the only update would be a site visit's been undertaken.
At least, so I think you just a review report in terms of the number of items outstanding.
I think it would be very limited weight of what we'd actually be able to. As I said, if it's for another committee, maybe it should be a recommendation should be that they review it and see what they would request rather than us as this committee deciding what it is they want, as Councillor Swain said. I don't suggest, but I'm just conscious that it's only worth having a report if it's actually got detail that members can actually use. I'm conscious of that.
We could leave it to PG&A to take up.
Okay. So perhaps you can put forward a recommendation to PG&A rather than S&R to see whether they want to put that forward as a recommendation, Councillor Swain.
Okay, the recommendation is that we recommend that.
So we have seconded it, so we can have a vote on that.
Well, Chairman, I can withdraw my seconding, and then I think it may fail.
Okay, so we can we talk to identify what the reasoning behind the report is, and then decide on whether some form of report needs to go as part of an audit process that PG&A look at in terms of enforcement. Can we put that forward for something that PG&A look at rather than having a recommendation at this stage? Because I don't think it's clear exactly what it would be in that report and what the purpose of the report was.
Yes, that's fair enough. As long as PG&A sort of pick up the ball and run with it.
Okay. I'm sure you can contact the chairman of PG&A to put that forward to them.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Swain. So if I go back to the recommendations, so the recommendations are that the planning enforcement policy appendix 2 is recommended for adoption to full council. Little 2, that members note the inclusion within the 21-22 budget cycle growth requests the provision of additional staffing resources. Do we do this by assent, or would you like a recorded vote?
Agreed.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Agreed.
So we now move on to item number 7.
Thanks, Chairman. I'm sorry, I don't agree with this. So if you could note that I don't agree with that at all. Thank you.
Okay, so if we don't agree with it, then we have to do a recorded vote.
Okay.
Are we taking both items together?
Can we not do by dissent, Chairman?
Dissent. That's for clarification from Tara.
Can you not just have dissent listed for Councillors White?
Yeah.
Chairman, we have been advised that if not all members are agreeing, i.e. we don't have assent, then we should be taking a vote. It doesn't have to be a recorded vote, but just the fact we need to take a vote, that's all, Chairman. Okay.
So in terms of it's one person against, is that correct?
Yes.
Shall I just quickly run through the names? Is that the?
Yes, please.
Okay. So this is for both the recommendations, as you just detailed, Chairman.
Correct.
Members, if you could just indicate for, against, or abstain, please. Councillor Mrs. Channer.
For, providing all the points have been taken into account.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Durham.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
For.
Helm.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Lagan.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Siddle.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Skeens, I don't think has yet joined us.
Yes,
Councillor
Councillor
you are. Apologies, Councillor Skeens. Sorry.
I joined about half an hour ago. Well, more than that, about 20 past. Sorry, I'm late. Yes, 4.
Thank you very much. Apologies for that. Councillor Stamp.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Swain.
4.
Councillor Mrs. Thompson.
4.
Councillor Miss White.
Against. If it's
Thank you very much. So, Chairman, the results of that is 10 for and 1 against. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Miss Bird. So we now move on to item number 7, approval to consult on the draft list of local heritage assets for the parishes of St Lawrence, Woodham Walter, Langford and Alting. This is found on pages 75 to 116. Members are reminded that if you wish to speak on this item, please make this known by using the chat function within this meeting. I will then come to you in turn. Please keep your points clear and succinct. Mr. Howson is now going to do a presentation for us, Mr. Howson.
Good evening, Chairman. I'll just get my screen up. Hopefully you can see this.
We can.
Right. Yes, I'm going to just show you a few slides, but I will only take 5 minutes of your time. This item seeks the committee's approval to consult on the next phase of the parish lists of local heritage assets. Most members will be familiar by now with these lists, but to recap, the buildings on these lists are those which fail to meet the strict criteria for national listing, but are nonetheless of local value because of their architectural and historic interest. They've been identified using our own adopted selection criteria, which is set out on the inside cover of each parish list. And inclusion on a local list is a light touch designation in that it does not impose any additional planning restrictions. The alterations an owner can currently make without the need for planning permission will remain the same following designation. But what inclusion on a local list does mean is that where planning permission is required, the heritage significance of the building will be a material consideration in determining the application. And as the report explains, preparation of such lists is something encouraged in national planning practice guidance. Over the past year, lists have been produced and adopted for 10 of the parishes in the Malton district. And this slide shows the front cover of each of the adopted parish lists, which are all currently available on the council's website. So we're now about a third of the way to completing the whole district. And this report concerns lists which have been drafted for the parishes of St Lawrence, Woodham Walter, Langford and Alting. They've been prepared with assistance from various local historians and enthusiasts who are individually credited. Preparation of the Woodham Walter list has been informed by the work of the wonderful local historian Pat Ryan, who sadly passed away last month. So I think the three documents for your consideration identify and celebrate a really interesting collection of historic buildings, 29 in total. And I'm just going to very briefly show you a few of the highlights in roughly chronological order of their age. The oldest building to be identified is St Lawrence Hall. This is the principal manor house of St Lawrence. And in this photograph, you can actually see the shadows of the medieval timber framed structure showing through the modern render. And a survey a couple of years ago revealed an impressive crosswing built around the year 1500, which originally had these amazing windows with arched heads. And there are only around 100 medieval houses to survive in the district, which makes this quite an important survival. Several fine Georgian farmhouses and farm buildings have been identified, particularly in Woodham Walter, where research by Pat Ryan established the date that each of these were built. Of course, these fine buildings illustrate the prosperity of farmers in the late Georgian period in this part of Essex. The lists include three lovely Victorian schoolhouses. The one at the bottom left is in Langford is designed by the county architect Frederick Chancellor, who also designed Langford Mill, one of the most notable and imposing buildings in Langford, replacing the previous mill, which burnt down in 1879. And then moving into the 20th century, there are an important group of architect-designed arts and crafts style buildings around the Warren estate in Woodham Walter, commissioned in the early 20th century by Henry Walter Thompson, who laid out the golf course. The berthing area for Stone Sailing Club in St Lawrence is based on the embarkation yard built in 1942 and used for the Normandy landings in 1944. So a particularly precious in situ remnant of a decisive event of World War II. And then finally, the youngest building in is St Lawrence Water Tower, which was built in 1966. And it's an elegant and sculptural landmark occupying a prominent position at the top of the hill. And of course, it's a monument to the 20th century improvements in the supply of water to the Dengie Peninsula. So In conclusion, if you decide to, the committee decides to approve these lists for public consultation, we will first of all write to every owner and then the parish councils and ward members seeking everyone's views. The draft list will be published on our website, and there will be the opportunity for members of the public to submit further nominations for consideration. And then following the public consultation, we will report back and seek approval from a future meeting of this committee to adopt the lists, incorporating any amendments as a result of the consultation. So that's the end of my brief presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Howson. So the recommendation as set out in the report is as follows: that the draft lists of local heritage assets for the parishes of St Lawrence, Woodden Walter, Langford and Alting are approved for public consultation. If any member wishes to second that motion, please turn on your video and mute your microphone and state your name, please.
Thank you, second, Chairman.
So we've got, I heard Councillor Helm first of all. Thank you very much, Councillor Helm. I would now like to call people who'd like. So the first person I have on my list is Councillor Stamp.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to thank Mr. Howson yet again. Even though I wasn't elected, he's produced many of these and taken them to the District Council. They're all excellent. Can't congratulate you enough on all the hard work. It's so important that heritage is saved for prosperity and for the next generations. And I personally would like to thank him again. So thank you, Mr. Howson. Excellent work. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Stamp. Councillor Lagan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to echo really Councillor Stamp's comments there. I mean, Tim, every time I see a list like this come across an order paper for us to look at, it's an absolute pleasure, because the huge learning that's given for us as members and other members of the public to look at the heritage that we've got. You know, I was born in Malden, but I've loved this district since I was born. And to learn about some of the buildings and the heritage we've got wonderful First World War and Second World War airfields and infrastructure and buildings that we have to protect. And this extensive work is first class and absolutely fantastic. So I just want to echo that and have that on record, and you have our appreciation for that. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Lagan. Councillor Durham.
Oh, thank you, Chairman. I would like to thank Mr. Howson. You know, this is yet again a sterling bit of work, and we're gradually working our way through the villages. It's fascinating details. I was just a little bit shocked and saddened when Tim told us that Pat Ryan had passed away last month. I knew Pat pretty well. She, you know, what would we have done in local history without Patricia Ryan? A lovely lady. So thank you for letting me know. She is actually the mother of one of the parish council clerks in my Warden division. So forewarned is forearmed. But thank you, Mr. Howson, for an excellent piece of work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Durham. Councillor Skeens.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, fantastic work. Just a quick question about things still to be added to the list. As I know you're aware, Tim, I sent some information over about the stages in Burnham. How does that get worked into the system? Because I think we did Bradwell and Burnham and those sort of things some time ago. Do you know how it all comes back into the system to ensure that it does get involved through the chair?
Thank you, Councillor Skeens. Mr. Howson.
Yes, Burnham has not been done yet. It is in draft form. I had a meeting with several locals and some delegates of Burnham Town Council just before lockdown. So they were hoping to help out with survey work, which has delayed things slightly. But Burnham is next on my list to tackle.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Howson.
Thank you.
Councillor Channer.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, it's going to sound like the Mr. Howson fan club tonight, and quite rightly so. Yeah, appreciation, because Mr. Howson knows how much I value his work, and I'd just like to say thanks, because St Lawrence is in my ward of Mayland. So thank you for what you have put forward there, and I'm sure St Lawrence Parish Council and residents of St Lawrence will be pleased to see what you're intending. Also, Councillor White's been in contact and asking if I could please highlight, and thanks for all your hard work. And she refers to the water tower, because that's very, very important. So thank you. There is a mutual admiration society, but I think the council's very lucky, I have to say this, to have an officer such as Mr. Howson, who really is diligent in his work and really does bring the heritage of our wonderful district home to everyone through the work that he does. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Channer. Councillor Thompson.
Sorry, Chairman. Yes, I'm afraid it's another one, the Appreciation Society. But I do. Mr. Howson has always done such wonderful work, very passionate about his subject. And I'd like to thank him very much on behalf of the whole district. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. I have a quick question for Mr. Howson, and again, I appreciate the work that you're doing and the fantastic reports and information that you provide for us. Just out of interest, how long is this going to take, and when will it all be done? Yeah, because it seems a mammoth job, and you are doing sterling work. But is there a sort of an end point, or when you see that you will have done the whole district? You'll be as old as me, probably.
Well, we've only been doing it for, I think, 1.5 years, and we've covered a third of the district. So that's pretty good. We'll eventually get there within not too distant future.
Okay, thank you very much.
Chairman, can I just jump in there? It's funny because you know when we get the list of leavers, I always check to make sure Mr. Howson's not on that list of leavers because he is irreplaceable, as all the members have actually said tonight, and so many other officers. I'm not sort of just singling him out, but he does an excellent job. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stamp. So I now move to the vote. Can I take assent for this particular recommendation that we adopt the draft for approved public consultation for those parishes?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you, members. So we now move on to agenda item 8, North Quay Development Brief, supplementary planning document found on pages 117 to 204. Members are reminded that if you wish to speak on this item, please make this known by using the chat function within this meeting. I will then come to you in turn. Please keep your points clear and succinct. Mrs. Longman, could you please present your report?
Okay, so the report concerns the responses to the 6-week public consultation on the draft North Quay Development Brief supplementary planning document. The North Quay Development Brief is a requirement of the local development scheme and is a project from the Central Area Master Plan, SPD. This background is set out in paragraphs 3.1 to 3.6 of the report. All the responses are summarised within Appendix 1, the consultation statement, and I've given an overall summary at paragraph 4.4 in the report. Overall, there is support for the North Quay Development Brief supplementary planning document to regenerate the North Quay as in the North Quay defined area in the manner set out in paragraph 3.3 of the report. Amendments are proposed to the brief, summarised and set out in paragraphs 4.4.1 to 4.4.3. Sorry.
All right.
Amendments are proposed referencing strategic policy guidance, further design guidance and action plans and strategies not available at the time of the public consultation. The prosperity strategy is referenced to promote the North Quay and to stimulate private sector interest in the area. We've updated the developer contributions section to take account of RAM's contributions and progress with SIL. There was a requirement for a SEA HRA screening opinion. That concluded that SEA wasn't required, but the HR screening is completed in consultation with Natural England, given the proximity of the North Quay to designated habitats. So the brief provides a planning infrastructure provision and design guidance framework to bring development forward to regenerate the North Quay as set out in adopted LDP policy and the Magdalen Haybridge Central Area Master Plan SPD. The brief will give greater certainty and assistance to developers working up planning applications in the North Quay area for employment-led regeneration schemes. The North Quay development brief will be a material consideration in the planning process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Logman, and thank you very much for such a detailed report that you provide to us and the work that you've put into it.
Thank you.
So I'd now like to put forward the recommendation, and the recommendation that the North Quay development brief be adopted as a supplementary planning document. If any member wishes to second that motion, please turn on your video, unmute your microphone and state your name now, please.
Councillor Helm, I'll second that, please.
Thank you, Councillor Helm.
My God, Councillor Helm, you're quick tonight.
He's fast tonight. Thank you. I will now invite members to make any comments on the report, and I have Councillor Swain.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I have two concerns in the document. Firstly, the comment of a new generous quayside walk is a long-term aspiration. Why is it only an aspiration? It doesn't sound like it's really fully catered for in the plan. The second area concerns park and ride parking or whatever, public parking, and how people may use either the 288 or other bus services to access Malden High Street. There's no specific provision for such parking, and it mentions only that you would look for an opportunistic or a redundant site. It should be more specifically catered for, I would have thought. Lastly, I note the flood risk management document, risk assessment, I think, is due imminently. I wonder if that is still the case.
Thank you, Councillor Swain. Mrs. Longman.
Hi there. Yeah, I think there were about 3 questions there. Regarding the quayside walk, in terms of on the North Quay side, that is an aspiration, but because of existing land ownerships and access to private property, we can't achieve the same on the North Quay as we have done on the South Quay. So we have the Riverside Walk on the South Quay that then goes over Fallbridge. You can go down Station Road so far, but we're relying on the South Wharf development to open up that access to the Haybridge Creek frontage. So it's an aspiration in the sense that we would love to have a northern Riverside Walk, but we cannot achieve that due to the current land ownerships.
Okay. Your next question was?
With regard to provision for parking, there is existing parking at at retail areas around the North Quay, so at the Blackwater Retail Park, Tesco, Lidl, but specifically just for parking, the development sites identified are for employment-led regeneration, not to just provide car parking, but any developments that come forward will have to pay regard to the adopted vehicle parking standards for parking required to support any redevelopment. And the third question was, the flood, yes, the Causeway Strategic Flood Risk Review is now with us in draft form. It was held up because of COVID and county who are preparing it, having to divert resources. But that covers the entire Causeway area, where obviously it sits in the highest flood zone. So that review is looking at all the current flood risk data, bringing it all together. There's a whole section in the North Quay Development Brief, Section 6, flood resilience and infrastructure. So it's all set out in there, what that review will achieve.
Okay, Councillor Swain.
Yes, I'd just like to come back on this question of parking, because all the areas that are in Blackwater retail or wherever, or in Bentals, they're all limited hours parking because they're intended for the businesses that are there. That's not very useful if somebody wants to leave a vehicle and go up into the town. It's like they'd be restricted, and I think it's perhaps not just the Causeway, but slightly wider there, and perhaps in the context of the developments in Heybridge and the North Heybridge Garden suburb, when it happens, that a proper park and ride provision should be made.
I think from my knowledge, this is something that we have looked at and has come to overview and scrutiny in the past. And the logistics of establishing a park and ride. There are parking spaces at Tesco's which are part of the park and ride scheme of the bus that goes around the town centre. So people parking in that area could make use of the free bus that does go up Market Hill. However, in terms of my view, and my head as strategy and resources is we need the members of the public to use the town centre car parks for our revenue. So I think we need to encourage people to get into the town centre.
Yes, I just thought that the Tesco car park is also time limited.
It is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Channer.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yeah, a good report, and obviously great to see the responses from the consultation document. But I'm sorry, Chairman, I'm going to question the recommendation again that this committee adopts this supplementary planning document, because of course the Morden and Central Area Master Plan, which I think was supportive of S5, was adopted by Council. And this planning brief, supplementary planning document, is very, very important because it is about planning, infrastructure, design framework, and about regeneration. And actually, it is fundamental regarding our strategic theme of prosperity, which of course is part of our corporate plan and very much the priorities of this council. So therefore, Chairman, as it is a policy document, which is actually very much linked to the local development plan, and indeed the local development framework, or whatever that's now called, should this not be a recommendation to council for council to adopt it as they did with the SPDs for the Morden and Central Area Master Plan?
Thank you, Councillor Channer. Could one of the officers come back on that, please?
Yeah, the recommendation, yeah, the North Quay Development Brief, is that the recommendation to council then, or is that?
No, it just says that we adopt the supplementary planning document. That's the recommendation.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry.
Sorry, if I can pick that up. Apologies, Chairman. That should be a recommendation to council. Okay. Sorry that for the.
You're just trying to give me my tails, aren't you, Mr. Dodson? Okay.
Sorry to be a pain, Chairman, about it.
No, you're not being a pain at all, Councillor Channer. We're making sure that we follow the correct procedure, which is what's important in terms of running a council. So if we can amend the recommendation so that the North Quay Development Plan be adopted as a supplementary planning document and to be recommended to full council. Councillor Stamp.
Thank you, Chairman. There's no need now. That's just exactly what I wanted, because I know that committees have delegated powers and we need to be clear of what delegated powers they have. Otherwise, there's no point in keep having committee meetings if everything's going to go back to full council for recommendation. But I think Councillor Channer's exactly right in raising it, and Mr. Dodson actually did explain it. Thank you, clarified it.
Thank you, Councillor Stamp. So there are no more people who've requested to speak, so can I have assent for that recommendation to be taken to full council?
Agreed.
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 I'm terribly sorry, but I don't agree.
Okay, so we need to have a recorded vote. Ms. Bird.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, if you could just indicate for, against or abstain, please. When I call your name out, please. Councillor Mrs. Channer.
4.
Thank you very much. Councillor Durham.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
4.
Councillor Helm.
4.
Thank you very much.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Lagan.
Against, please, Tara.
Thank you. Councillor Siddle.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Skeens.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Stamp.
4.
Swain.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Thompson.
4.
And Councillor Miss White.
4, please.
Thank you so
4,
much.
please, Tara.
Thank you. Yep, got you. Thank you. Chairman, the results of that are 10 for and 1 against. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tara. So we now move to agenda item 9, Promenade Park Garden Play Scheme, found on pages 205 to 220. Members are reminded that if you wish to speak on this item, please make this known by using the chat function within this meeting. I will then come to you in turn. Please keep your points clear and succinct. Mr. Butcher, could you please present the report?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm in Matt Wilson's absence tonight. Matt's produced this report and is our coast and countryside manager. But as part of the original proposal in November 2018, we went to committee and sought approval on an approach for a new accessible play area in Promenade Park. This was funded from Section 106 monies and also funded from capital investment from the council. And as part of this agreement, a public consultation was required. After a slight COVID delay, this public consultation was conducted online in the summer of 2020. All that feedback has since been collated. It's been presented back to our ward members for review, and we think we've made some really good improvements to the scheme. We want to make sure the site is accessible for younger years and for children who may have specific access requirements. We bring this to you today as part of the formal sign-off for us to then commence with the procurement approach, which we would like to start in the coming weeks, with a view for construction to start in the early part of 2021 and a target completion date in the late spring, early summer of 2021. Thank you, Chair. If there's any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Butcher. So the recommendations as set out in the report are as follows. Little 1, that the revised garden play area design proposals attached at appendices A and C be agreed. Little 2, that officers proceed with procurement of all elements of the play site and associated works based upon this design via existing supplier framework agreement. If any member wishes to second that motion, please turn on your video, unmute your microphone and state your name now, please.
Happy to second, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Durham. I will now invite members to make any comments, and I have Councillor Durham.
I should be extremely brief, Chairman. I think this is excellent. There's a huge amount of work gone into this, and it will be an absolute asset for not only Malden, the Prom Park, but the district as a whole. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for that support, Councillor Durham. Councillor Stamp.
Yeah, thank you. I do echo what Councillor Durham said, but I have a little bit of a couple of questions, that's okay. Does it cater for disabled and special needs children? Is there anything specifically in there? And I see you nodding your head, so when I stop speaking, can you explain that to members and the members of the public who are listening? And the other question and reassurance I would like to have is security element. You put, or the district put that beautiful, was it a hide or something, whatever it was, and it kept getting damaged. What guarantees have we got, if any, that this isn't going to be maybe damaged in the future? Are there any guarantees? Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Stamp. Yes, there are some specific elements going in that are specifically for children with access requirements, things like swings, which will take a wheelchair and can be strapped in, and other safe swing and safe play for children with those specific needs and some learning disabilities as well. We hope that this will be the first part, and we will look to develop the surrounding area further, albeit enhanced, and have a sensory area in some of the soft planting and those sorts of things. So yeah, we're trying to make it as inclusive to all as possible. In relation to the security, I'm afraid I can't make any guarantees, but we are proposing as part of the scheme that we do invest into a new CCTV column that will cover the area. That CCTV will be part of our Chelmsford contract, so it will be live monitoring, and they will be able to, if any incidents are occurring, they will be able to alert the police to respond very, very quickly.
Brilliant. Chairman, can I just come back and ask another question, a supplementary, please?
Councillor
Mr. Butcher, are we doing a sensory garden as well? I mean, are we doing planting? Because it's not just a matter of going on swings. We can stimulate children in other ways and encourage them. Have we consulted anybody on sensory gardens? Have we got a special area that can be accessed to, whether it be on raised beds? I don't know. I can't tell for the drawing. I have tried, but I think it's really important that all members and the members of the public know exactly what Malden are planning at this stage. Thank you.
Yes, there will be a. It is our intention to put a sensory garden in there. Councillor Stamp, I can only apologise. It's not my field of expertise, and Matt Wilson will be able to give you a lot more detail if he wasn't unwell tonight. Okay. But I'm happy to ping you an email with all the follow-on details. But yes, it is absolutely our intention to have a sensory garden, different plants and trees and shrubs for children to look, feel, smell. Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. I think other members would be interested to know about that as well, and maybe an app or something to be developed in the future. I mean, sometimes they have little special iPads and everything, and it's a great learning tool for children who may need some extra assistance to actually go and get very excited when they're actually in a park and an open space. So thank you. Congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sam. Councillor Lagan.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. First of all, just commend the officers for the approach. We ward members were invited down with Matt on a very nice summer's day to go through the whole progress and process to walk through. And my initial reaction was I was horrified. They're going to rip the maize out. They're going to rip the cedar out. It's going to be awful. You know, these things have been put in, and they have been put in by really fantastic organisations over the years, like the Malden Society, who deserves some mention of the work that they do. However, when you stop and think about it, Councillor Stamp mentioned about security. There's a lot of unsavoury behaviour that actually goes around in that area, regrettably. And this is a young person's play area that really will bring some stimulation. So it'll actually be, I think, a safer area for families, especially young children, to go with their parents or carers. Having a significantly disabled family member ourselves, I commend the thought that's gone into the work to bring these guys to be inclusive, which is what they should be across absolutely every walk of life. So really, the initial shock was, my God, should we be spending this money? Then it was explained that it was ring fenced, the money was there, and then the plans which have been supported, and the proof of the pudding is in the eating, because the consultation has given some very strong feedback for that. So I think it's a really good thing. It's going to bring a different dynamic. It's evolution within the park area, and I look forward to seeing this realised. And again, what Steve has just said, along with Matt, that sort of the next stages that can bring the learning and inclusivity in a safe and comfortable environment coming forward. So I just appreciate what you've done.
Thank you, Councillor Lagan. Councillor White.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just as to thank the officers for their work on this. I mean, ever since I was chairman of community services, which used to deal with the prom park and the play park, I've always been in support of it, because it is the jewel in our crown, and it is very important for the Malden District and the Malden District Council to make the prom park the best it can be. And I think this is only a good thing. So keep up the good work. Brilliant.
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillor Swain.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'd like to say that I and Councillor Lagan and one or two other Malden councillors have had an opportunity to discuss the whole project with Matt Wilson, for which we are very grateful. And so we were fully in the picture of what was intended for the area, and I understand that there's overwhelming support for such an activity, which I'm sure will help to draw more people to the Promenade Park and provide a wider variety of enjoyable features for, well, particularly for younger children. I fully support the scheme. I'm on the financial question. As I understand it, it's a combination of Section 106 money, which is specifically for this kind of project or this project, and other pot of money that has been put aside for goodness knows 2 or 3 years, I suppose. And I just wanted to check, because I was under the impression that the Section 106 money did need to be used in the fairly near future. I don't know if I have confirmation on that, but the money is obviously set aside and dedicated to it.
Thank you, Councillor Swain. Mr. Butcher.
Yes, that's correct, Councillor Swain. The money, so the Section 106 money, that was £52,000. That was awarded to Malden District Council 2017. We actually had a 10-year time frame to spend that, so we were well within that. And the other 48,000 was approved by committee from Malden District Council from their capital budget in 2018. That was then carried forward into the next financial year, and subsequently here we are now looking to allocate that money and perhaps even spend all of it before the 31st of March. We'd like to, we might be a bit ambitious, but we're hoping for an April-May opening of the park.
Yes, certainly hope so. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Swain. Councillor Channer.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yes, I'm fully supportive of this, and actually Councillor Stamps touched on something about the Century Garden, and that's good to hear that there is going to be a Century Garden, and I'm sure the whole committee, and Councillor Stamps said other members will be interested. I think, Chairman, it would be useful for that information to come round to all committee members, as it was raised in it. But can I just say, I appreciate there's been the public consultation. I appreciate there's some work to do with this and going through procurement or whatever. But to give ownership on something like a Century Garden, or it's going to be have disabled persons, only suggestion, Chairman, just thing to bear in mind. And I'll declare an interest here, because in the past I've been involved in organisations that have sensory impairment people. In fact, I was a member myself of Swans. Sometimes we all need support. And actually what's quite nice, and I've certainly seen it in other areas, whereby when we're doing something like this, maybe a competition amongst our sensory impaired people, disabled people, or in fact the general public, to have a naming of perhaps what the Century Garden area might be called. And I've seen that happen before. So people really find that interesting to know something's coming, but also be involved in something whereby they have a chance perhaps to name that part of the site as well. And that gives then real public, if you like, stakeholdership or ownership as well. I'm just making a suggestion, Chairman. That was all, really.
Thank you, Councillor Channer. I'm sure we can incorporate that, Mr. Butcher.
Yes, something we'll take forward, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Skeens.
Absolutely beautiful scheme, really wonderful idea. Just one comment, a sort of comment that I'm like to make quite often as time goes on, and that is great for Malden, which is superbly provided in the Prom Park. But I do need to draw everybody's attention to the rest of the district, and in particular, obviously, since Burnham South is my ward, Burnham and the Riverside Park there. It will be. I just want to try and, as much as I can, push into officers' minds and other members' minds that the more tourism and the more facilities that we can provide across the district, the better. And I do hope that a scheme like this or similar schemes will start appearing in places like Burnham and some of the other outlying towns and villages. I think it's really important.
Okay, I'm sure that's something that we can bear in mind, Mr. Butcher.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Skeens. Yes, we do have proposals in the capital budget for next financial year, specifically for Riverside Park. They are service improvements, but that will be down to councillors to debate and decide. But should they choose to support a development in Burnham on Crouch, a similar play area, would be absolutely delighted to deliver something like that in the area.
Thank you, Mr. Butcher. Councillor Swain, you wanted to come back. Could you do that briefly, please?
Yes, very briefly. I know people. I was concerned about the removal of the cedar there, and as Matt Wilson explained, it is actually in danger of toppling over. It's unstable, so that's why this it unfortunately has to come out.
Thank you, Councillor Swain, for that contribution. Yeah, I would just like to add that I think this is a fantastic scheme. I know the resources of the council are stretched at the moment. However, the money has been set aside, as Mr. Butcher has specified, and also the Section 106 agreement money. So yeah, we are only enhancing and enabling more people to come to the Prom Park by this development, and it should be commended. So I would now like to thank you, Mr. Butcher. I'd now like to move to the vote. Can I take that via assent, please?
Agreed.
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 Thank you very much, members. I'm conscious of the time, and we have only got to item number 10. So what I would like to suggest is that we have a 5-minute comfort break before we move on to the remaining items. Are we agreed to that?
Agreed.
Thank you, Chairman.
So it's now 7:56. So if we could start back again at 8:01. Thank you very much. That was just to make sure that we've all got our videos recorders set for break off so we don't miss it after the meeting. So we now move to agenda item 10, update on disabled facilities grant related issues, found on pages 221 to 224. Members are reminded that if you wish to speak on this item, please make this known by using the chat function within this meeting. I will then come to you in turn. Please keep your points clear and succinct. Mr. Gaylor is attending the meeting to present this item and will be showing a few slides as part of his summary of the report to highlight the key points. Mr. Gaylor.
Thank you, Councillor. Just for note, unfortunately, I'm having connection issues, so I'm not going to display the slides just in case it interferes with anything, but I will go through what's in the report. So obviously, this is to provide an update in relation to the Council's Disabled Facilities Grant Programme up to Q2 of 2020-2021. So the key recommendations and issues are really that members note a change of focus, if you like, from the term Disabled Facilities Grant to the more all-encompassing term of private sector housing objectives. The second recommendation is that members note the impact, obviously, of COVID on service delivery, and I'll come on to that again in a minute. And the third point is just to go through some of the stats and figures that we've got up to Q2, which is up to the 30th of October 2020. So just a very brief update on the process itself. So obviously the Disabled Facilities Grant is a requirement under the Housing Grants and Construction and Regeneration Act 1996. The Disabled Facilities Grant is administered as part of the Better Care Fund. So obviously we get a pot of money and that pays for the Disabled Facilities Grant works. Now the fund has been increased year on year by central government, of which Malden gets a proportion. And those looking to access the funds typically apply for a grant. We do a means test to see that what their incomes and savings are and to determine whether there's any contributory finances required towards the completion of those works. Now, whilst officers and members will refer to that as the Disabled Facilities Grant, as I've mentioned, it's part of a much wider scheme of works referred to as the private sector housing objectives. And so you may start to hear it being referred to in that term moving forward. In relation to the various impacts on service delivery for 2019, 2020 and 2020 to 2021, obviously the biggest, there's two main ones. The first one was the transformation programme. The council went through a major transformation programme to implement the Ignite model, and that concluded around October 2019. Now, as with any large-scale transformation programme, there were impacts in relation to service delivery, and job roles were redefined and staff left and joined. Where we are now is that as of July 2020, we have a disabled facilities grant caseworker, and we also have a disabled facilities grant specialist. And their job is to basically administer the functions of the private sector housing objectives. Primarily that is the disabled facilities grant work, but their scope will start to increase as things go on. In relation to the second main contributory factor to service delivery is obviously COVID. Now, we've had to really adapt our services because of the substantial effects of the pandemic. So initially, because many of our customers and clients, if you like, are vulnerable people, shielding and COVID secure checks delayed many aspects of the DFG process. So assessments and technical surveys, administration of applications, all of that slowed. Now, as the COVID rules were relaxed, we were able to then incrementally resume different aspects of the work, but we geared it towards completing all the administration and paperwork processes so that they were ready to go to contractors for when that side of the work began to open up, and we were allowed to get contractors to go back around to people's houses in a safe and secure way. So those were the two main impacting factors on the administration of the Better Care Fund. So in terms of the general work performance for 2019-2020, 2019-2020 we were allocated a fund of around 499,961. For that financial year, the council approved 36 cases, and the total expenditure for that period amounts to 351,000. So the remaining balance, which was 148,961, that was carried over for the continued purpose of working on disabled facilities grants. So in terms of where we are now for 2020-2021, our budget for this year is 539,488. And that's, if any of that is underspent, just to confirm, that will be carried over to 2021-2022. It will not be lost. As of Q2, the council has received 74 referrals for DFG works, and there's a further 49 cases in the background at various stages of application. Now, the current committed expenditure amounts to £79,113, and that seems like a very small amount. It gives you some scope about how limited we've been with all the restrictions during COVID. But there is a significant number of applications in progress, and it's estimated at the minute that we'll be in the region of a spend of around 250,000 to 300,000 by the end of the financial year. So that's where we are at the minute. And the last comment, because I know it's a question that some people have raised. As far as we're aware, the government is continued to the commitment to fund these types of work through the Better Care Fund. As I said, we're not going to lose any money. Anything that isn't spent this year will be carried over into the next financial year specifically for that purpose. And it's hoped that as things start to unlock further, that we'll be able to speed ahead with many of the works, many of the applications that have been processed up to that certain point, and we'll start to work more effectively with contractors to get stuff done speedily. So that's where we are at the minute. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Mr. Gaylor. We'll come on to questions in a minute. So first of all, I'd like to set out the recommendations, and the recommendations are little one, that members note the impact of the ongoing COVID-19 issues on the service provision. Little two, that members receive and note the status up to Q2 to 30th of October 2020. If any members wish to second that motion, please turn on your video, unmute your microphone and state your name now, please.
I'll second that, Councillor Siddle.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stamp. I will now invite members to make any comments on the report, and Councillor Skeens.
Yes, thank you very much. I just want there was something that Damien said early on. I think it refers to 4.5 on page 222. Whilst many officers and members refer to the associated works as a disabled facilities grant, it's actually part of a wider statutory responsibility, better referred to as a private sector housing objective. I'm worried about that because that sounds like a much more generally applicable sort of way of spending the money. I do feel we need to focus. I'm sure it will do, but I think there are dangers in changing the names of things. If it's a disabled facilities grant all about helping people with disabilities, we should not put it under a title. Well, even though it may naturally sit under it, we need to keep that as the main focus. Private sector housing objectives is sort of very ephemeral. It's sort of it doesn't seem to mean anything, whereas disabled facilities grant is clear, precise, and we know exactly what it's all about.
Mr. Gallagher. Thank you.
Okay, no, I'll take the point. What I would say is that the disabled facility, or the Better Care Fund, which administers the disabled facilities grant, will always be for the purpose of, if you like, vulnerable customers. Just to give you some of the examples of stuff that fall within the private sector housing remit, and this is an example that one of my other officers has advised on. We've discussed it. So we've talked about, for example, handy person services for vulnerable people. We've talked about home from hospital proposals. We've talked about aspects of tackling fuel poverty. So those are the sort of things that fall within the private sector housing objectives. I mean, by all means, it will always be referred to as the disabled facilities grant, process. But it was just to make members aware that that's a smaller part of a bigger chain of works.
Sure, no, through the chair, I do understand that, but it just felt like we were going, it's all going to be it's just going to become too vague for me if we start talking about the private sector housing objectives. It loses touch with the people we're aiming it at. Vulnerable people may be different, obviously, to disabled people, but I just think we need to take care with that. That's all.
Understand. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Skeens. I don't have a request for any other councillors to speak, so thank you, Mr. Gaylor. So I will now move to the vote. Can we take that, Councillor Stump? Are you coming back then, or are you just flashing at me? Oh, you were just on
no,
mute.
Sorry, I'm just waiting to go agree, Mr. Chairman. I was just preempting you. I do apologise.
That's all right. Sorry, Councillor Lagan. You got in there just before, Councillor Lagan.
Sorry, I bet you all love me tonight. Sorry, I really get. I think what Nick's has hit the nail on the head. That worried me a little bit about the terminology of it, and it still worries me a little bit. So I'd feel a little bit. Although I get the scheme, I get the intent of it. I think it's an absolutely fantastic thing to have, and maybe spend every single halfpenny that we've got on the people who need it and deserve it. But I'm just not very keen on the title.
Okay.
So I wonder if you could put like disabled and vulnerable persons in there or something like that. It's just an idea.
Some feedback, Mr. Gaylor.
Sure. Look, I think that's the national term that's used, unfortunately, which is,
okay.
You're absolutely right. It's not. It makes it very generic. But across what I would say is across all organisations that refer to it as a private sector objectives, the disabled facilities grant is always present, and so are some of the other schemes as well that I've mentioned.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I shall now move to the votes. If members are in agreement, we can do this via assent. Can I take assent for this particular recommendation that we note the impact of the ongoing COVID-19 on issues on service provision, and that members receive and note the status up to Q2 of the 30th October 2020. Is that agreed?
Noted.
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, members.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gaylor. So we now move on to item number 11, which is the documentation retention policy update found on pages 225 to 292. Members are reminded that if you wish to speak on this item, please make this known by using the chat function within this meeting. I will then come to you in turn. Please keep your points clear and succinct. Mr. Leslie has informed me that Mrs. Holmes is going to be presenting this report. Mrs. Holmes.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as hopefully all councillors will know, we currently have a document retention policy following a recent audit and review of all our documents. It
Before
became
you
clear.
continue, Mrs. Holmes, Councillor Thompson, you have your mic on. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So we reviewed the policy. We've updated it. The previous policy referred to the new General Data Protection Regulations and the Data Protection Act, 2018, coming into force. They're obviously now in force, so the policy's been amended to reflect that. The second recommendation also asks members to provide delegated authority for officers for the Data Protection Officer and the Director of Resources to amend the appendix at the retention periods at the end of that document. Those periods are based on managers' recommendations, considering how long they need to keep documents, and that is reviewed annually, and allowing that delegated authority means that officers can keep up to date with changes and don't have to return to members to do what's an operational matter, and it allows us to keep reviewing it, making any changes that are needed. Obviously, if the main policy was to change, that would still return to members, but the second recommendation allows us to have a working document that hopefully officers and staff can use and is a live document without having to return to members on a regular basis.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes. So the recommendations are set out in the report as follows. To the Council, item little 1, that the documentation with policy attached at Appendix 1 be approved. Item little 2, that delegated authority be given to the Director of Resources in consultation with the Data Protection Officer to make any operational changes to the retention periods contained within the policy. If any member wishes to second that motion, please turn on your video, unmute your microphone and state your name now, please.
Kevin, I'll second that, please, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lagan. I will now invite members to speak, and I think Councillor Skeens is the first on my list.
Hello, yes. I'm concerned about getting rid of any documents that the council hold, especially in this electronic era when it can all be reduced down to a microdot or the electronic equivalent and be thoroughly searchable. While I understand paper documents, and somebody tell me if we're only talking about paper documents here, but if we're talking about electronic records, I think the more we keep the better, and in a fully searchable function that we should be able to get hold of. I can give you a perfect example. We were looking for ownership of a particular piece of land in Burnham for which we had a public project considered, and we couldn't find whether Malden District Council owned it or not, perhaps because it goes off to some dark archive somewhere. I'm very keen on the idea that we keep everything electronically that we produce, and that it's really intelligently searchable, and that we don't get rid of anything except the paper, which of course can be recycled.
Holmes would like to come back.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, the Data Protection Act in relation to personal data requires us to destroy data when it's no longer required. That's a legal requirement. That relates to personal data. So unless we have a justifiable reason for retaining that, we have to have an end date. Now, some documentation statute requires us to keep it permanently, which we do, and there may be some documents, certainly in terms of land ownership, those sort of documents we would keep for the period that we own the land. But unfortunately, we would be in breach of the Data Protection Act if we didn't have a policy, and if we kept all documents forever, because I think the Information Commissioner would quite rightly say, why do you need to keep a request for somebody's bin to have been failed to have a bin collected that goes back 20 years? There's no need for us to keep that information. So the idea of the policy is that we only keep those documents that the council need to function. So that's planning documents, statutory documents, but we have then policies in place to get rid of the documents in terms of the day-to-day queries, the short pieces of work that officers deal with on a day-to-day basis, where once we've completed a job, there's no requirement for us, there's no legal need for us to keep that documentation. So unless we can justify for every type of document why we would need to keep it forever, what future use it would have, we need to have a document retention policy. But if you look through, some of the documents that we have do have a permanent time frame on them, so they are kept permanently, where there is a legal requirement to do that, or where there is an ongoing need.
Okay.
I can just quickly come back.
Councillor Skeens.
Completely accept that, of course, everything under data protection rules we must accord with that. But I am concerned that information that could prove useful 10, 15, 20 years from now does go missing. And it would be wonderful to have some guidance on how, well, either a system in which there's a redaction process, so you finish with something, you go through, you take out all the personal details, but you have the main facts still there, or you have, or some, but it just seems to me that we are in danger of losing what it is at the end of the day, a record and a history of the district. And I am hoping that we are on the side of keeping as much as we possibly can in a searchable format, rather than saying, oh, well, the law doesn't require us to keep this, so we won't. That was the phrase that I was worried about in your statement, Emma. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Skeens. Sorry.
Chair, is it possible to come back?
You can.
In terms of historical documents, there is scope for officers, if they feel documents have historical significance, that they can be referred to the Essex Records Office. So if there are documents that are found that are old, that have some implication on the history of the district, they can be passed on and retained for future use, so that they're not lost.
Okay, thank
you.
History. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Skeens. Councillor Stamp.
Thank you, Chairman. I think Emma Holmes has answered the point. What I wrote down, as I agree with it, as long as it's legal and lawful. But I note that Emma's referred to the Essex Records Office. I totally understand what Councillor Skeens is saying. We have had disputes about ownership because the records haven't been kept. And I totally share his concerns. And I'm sure that Malden District Council, when they do their, how many documents, I can't remember, it was on the previous committee meeting, that they're going to all put on microfiche or whatever you call it. It's going to scan, it's going to cost this council a lot of money. I hope they do take Councillor Skeens' comments into consideration, because it's very true. Historical documents do get lost, and it causes parish and town councils a massive headache when there is land ownership and disputes about who owns what. So I think that was a very good point, well made, Councillor Skeens, and hopefully Emma Holmes and the District Council will take on board those comments. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Stamp. Councillor Channer.
Thank you, Chairman. And I've heard what Councillor Skeens said. I'm very interested in that. Chairman, I do have a slight problem with the recommendation, and I understand about the delegation. I have heard what Emma Holmes has said. However, bearing in mind the McLeod judgment and how that's affected certain things, and there could be other things coming through of a legislative nature or regulation changes, etc., because I recognise some of these are the requirements that might be through legislation and regulations. I'd be happier if it said that we had a report back to the committee or council, let's say annually, just giving us any changes that may have occurred by officers regarding the operation of this. I think that might actually help some issues that Councillor Skeens raised. So, and I'd be interested to know, because I see the safeguarding one about 100 years. Safeguarding is a very important matter. Also, in terms of stuff, it may assist us because we're data controllers, and we might take a lead from some of the things that might come through if there are changes that we might need to be aware of. So I think it might be helpful to have feedback to the committee six monthly or annually, probably annual, realistic. And that's the issue I do have with the recommendation. I'd want it subject to notification or report back, Chairman, to the committee or council about any changes in this policy retention document that may have been done under operational issues under delegation.
Thank you, Councillor Channer. I think we got it before you froze. Ms. Holmes, would any changes in teams, if there was a legal change, would that come back to committee anyway?
If there was to the policy, yes, there would. What we're proposing is not in relation to the actual retention periods. To give some background, the council has information asset owners, which are various managers that are responsible for the data that comes under them, and part of the policy is they will keep records of data that is destroyed and when it is. So it certainly could be something that could be brought before committee on an annual basis, details of documents, if the committee made that decision.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Durham.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. Councillor Stamper has largely covered what I was going to say, but I do recall having discussions 2 or 3 years ago, may even be longer, about the massive amounts of paper records that the council was holding, and the programme that we had for scanning and archiving it electronically, and it was going to cost tens of thousands of pounds. In fact, I think it was considerably more than that, and there was concern raised at the time about the old planning documents, and other councillors are quite right in that it's a very frequent thing where we need to go back and check certain aspects of planning. But there are some very, very nice documents amongst the ones that we hold, may not necessarily be historic, but are notable locally, or of interest locally. And I don't know I don't recall what we resolved last time about certain items, old deeds and things like that. It would be a great shame to destroy paper documents willy-nilly without going through them. They may not warrant going to the Records Office, but I think we should look to be keeping some that may be of interest to the wider public. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Durham. Apparently, we do keep items forever if it's required by Malden District Council. So we will not be deleting documents willy-nilly. Is the information that I've been provided with, and anything that's necessary will be kept and stored. Councillor Thompson.
Sorry, thank you. No, my question's already been answered. So
okay, thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Swain.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, I was involved in this sort of exercise in a previous council, small-scale stuff and in paper, largely, and I noted how ready people were to throw stuff out, and I managed to restrain and retain information which was of value for the background and the history of the parish. But I think there are two reasons for taking a very precautionary approach. One is that there'll be documents and workings and so on relating to past issues, and you never know when they may come in, become relevant again, and save you a lot of extra time in fleshing out some issues. The other is that quite a lot, and I think Councillor Durham has just alluded to them, quite a lot of the old documents may represent a lot of the history, and one of the main sources of history for the district. And I think it needs a practiced eye, really, to sort through stuff of that nature before throwing it out. I accept what's been said about personal data and what we do have to, and what we don't have to retain for legal purposes. But I think it's more the anything that might be useful for future planning, policy making, and anything that is of a vaguely social history nature should be retained.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Swain. Mrs. Holmes, any comments at all?
As I said, it is down to individual officers. Most planning documents, there is a requirement for us to keep them permanently anyway. So they are being retained in terms of the history of sites. Similarly with minutes, and other important documents. Most of the documents that are removed are the day-to-day business, and those are the ones that are done more routinely. Certainly with anything that's old, and certainly when I'm looking through deeds and old documents, some of them are beautiful in terms they're handwritten and scribed. So that wouldn't be something that I would, as an officer, would put in the shredder, because they are beautiful documents. It is down to individual managers, and as the data protection officer, I certainly am often asked in terms of removing or destroying documents, and certainly one of those questions is always, well, is it historical? Has it got any historical significance? I can't say that I'm aware of any what I would consider historical documents, or officers do have even been considered for destruction. Okay. Most of the documents we're talking about are day-to-day business, people's emails and those sort of things, and old files where the matter's been dealt with. If a person approached us again, we would be starting afresh, and the previous information wouldn't be relevant to that situation. But I appreciate members' concerns. Certainly information asset owners and officers get some training throughout the year in terms of data protection, and it certainly can be something we can highlight in the next round of training, the historical significance, so that if officers do think a document is of historical nature, they need to raise that, and we'll find an appropriate place to store it or pass it on to the records office. And we can certainly look to enforce that message going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Chairman, yes, I recall that in fact places like the land registry are becoming less and less useful if you do need to go back and reference ownership in the past, or identifying deeds and areas and property. So it could be valuable, could become a unique resource, some of this information.
Thank you, Councillor Swain.
Thank you.
Councillor Stamp, is it something new that you want to come back on?
No.
Okay. Is there anything that is going to add to this debate?
Well, yes, there is actually, Chairman. Thank you for Councillor Durham for highlighting the historical documents, and for Emma Holmes to actually put my mind at rest, because in my course of being a town councillor, I've come across some really old documents, and it would be such a shame if they were going to be shredded. So I think this debate has been fantastic, Chairman, and as long as it is carried through to the next level, that Emma has said there's going to be training for officers, because not everybody may appreciate the historical value of something. When I was 19, I never wanted to live in an old property or a Georgian house. Now I think they're fantastic, and we have to take that into consideration, Chairman. So thank you. So no, but yes.
Thank you,
but
Councillor Stamp. Noted. Councillor Channer, you wanted to come back again. Is this about your recommendation?
It's about my proposal, Chairman.
Okay.
Yes, I'd like to just amend that little too. I agree with it, but say subject to an annual report back to the committee about any changes in the retention, using that worded under delegated powers.
Okay, and the purpose of that is?
Well, just so we know, Chairman. That's well, I thought I made the point. Maybe I wasn't clear. I think it would be useful to know, because we're giving delegated powers, as I understand it. That's what that little 2 is seeking to officers to deal with the retention period operationally. I'm seeking that we have a report come back on that.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Leslie.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just thought it was worth clarifying for the purposes of the debate, the intention of the delegation. Obviously, we're looking at more of the operational matters around that. For example, if we're referring to a different paragraph in the Act, if there was a change around that, and it was really to avoid perhaps more operational changes coming back to the committee, appreciating that obviously committee time can be quite valuable, and therefore the benefits potentially of coming back with quite operational changes into that. I appreciate that there is an element of discretion delegation offered with that, and it's obviously needs for members to be comfortable with that being given to officers, but that really was the intention around that delegation, so we could really have more focused reports. But I think members need to be happy with that delegation to take place, and obviously there's other things we do. If there is a change significantly in GDPR, or members need to be made aware of, we will have other avenues to make that available. So that's really where the delegation was stemming from. But of course, it's for members to be comfortable and make the decision around that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Leslie. Councillor Chan, has that put your mind at ease at all?
Well, Chairman, I'm not seeking a lengthy report. I was just seeking, let's say, bullet points saying this was changed, this was changed, because it does refer to the detention, you know, and that's the issue. And I understand for operational, but I think in a way that is quite helpful because I'm bearing in mind the McLeod legislation and other things. So that's my proposal, Chairman. It might not be seconded, but I'll make.
Okay. Do we have a seconder for Councillor Chan's amendment to little 2? That
I'm happy to second it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Skeens.
I'd like to make a quick point.
Very quick point, please.
I am still concerned about the process. Obviously, I trust the officers, but people's views of what is important is vary, and I'm just expressing my concern that I'm worried because of past experience that stuff disappears we're going to need 20 years down the line.
It is one of those things, and I don't think we can ever cover absolutely every eventuality, but hopefully the officers are trained in the right way, and so therefore that should hopefully cover our concerns. So with the amendment to little 2, which is that a yearly report comes back to committee in terms of any changes to that policy, can I take assent for both those recommendations?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Yes.
Agreed.
Thank you very much, members. We now move on to agenda item 12, appointments to representatives on liaison committees, panels, issues found on pages 293 to 294. Members are reminded that if you wish to speak on this item, please make this known by using the chat function within this meeting. I will then come to you in turn. Please keep your points clear and succinct. Mr. Dobson, could you please present the report?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, there are a number of working groups and outside bodies that report directly into the Strategy and Resources Committee. These are set out in 3.1 of the report, and members are required to appoint representatives from the committee for the remainder of the municipal year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the recommendations that the committee appoints representatives to the bodies detailed in the report for the ensuing municipal year. If any member wishes to second that motion, please turn on your video, unmute your microphone and state your name now, please.
Second, Councillor Swain.
Thank you, Councillor Swain. So I have, does anybody have any comments on this particular? No. So, oh yes, Councillor Channer.
Well, yes, Chairman, could I just make an inquiry, please, before we go to the appointments?
Yeah.
The Malden Market one, which I was appointed to along with Thompson's and White, yes. I can never recall, Chairman, having been summoned to a meeting of this. Has it met?
No idea myself. Does any officer know the answer to that question?
Sorry, Chairman, this is...
Yes, Councillor Thompson.
No, I never was either, and I'm not aware, it hasn't met.
Okay.
Chairman, if I can help. I was on it a few years ago, but it's not met in the last 3 years, to my knowledge.
Okay. Mr. Dobson, do you know whether it's met?
I don't remember it meeting in the last year, Chairman, but if I could make a point, I think there are a number of task and finish groups on this list, and they still exist, but by their nature, task and finish groups should be time limited. I think in the first instance, we should maybe, or councillors should maybe appoint to these, but then they should meet to review their terms of reference and whether they're required anymore, and then they can make recommendations to the committee whether they continue after that.
Thank you, Mr. Dodson. So we'll take each of the groups in turn. And so we start with the waste management group, and from the chair, I will nominate Richard Siddle, Councillor Siddle, and Councillor Lagan. And then I would ask for 2 Conservatives nominations, please.
Well, Chairman, if you'll permit me then, I take it you want the membership coming from this committee, do you, or are these across the council?
From this committee.
Right. In that case, then I would propose Councillor White, because she was, I think, on it previously, from what the report says, and then Councillor Thompson or Durham, really, whoever would like to do it.
Chairman, I'm happy to do it because I was on the original waste working group that awarded this contract, so I do know. I've got a lot of background on it.
Useful expertise. Can I have that seconded, please?
Seconded.
I'll second that.
So White and Durham.
Right, so Councillor Siddle, Councillor Lagan, Councillor White and Councillor Durham. We come on to the next working group, which is the car parking task and finish working group.
Chairman, sorry to interrupt you.
Sorry.
No, sorry, I just want to clarify, are you going to do the proposals and then vote on them all at the end, or are you voting on each one?
We'll vote at the end on all, I think.
Lovely. Sorry, just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
That's okay. So car park task and finish working group. So from the chair, Councillor Siddle and Councillor Swain, and then I would ask for 2 Conservative nominations.
Can I propose, please, Councillor Thompson and White?
Okay, so we have Councillor Siddle, Councillor Swain, Councillor Thompson and Councillor White. Can I have a seconder for that, please?
Seconded.
Thank you, Councillor.
They were on there last year. That's what I'm proposing,
okay.
Chairman.
Thank you. Moulder Market member task and finish working group. So from the chair, I nominate Councillor Swain and Councillor Edwards, and I would ask for 2 Conservative nominations.
Again, Chairman, can I propose Thompson and White, please? Councillors Thompson and White.
Okay, so to confirm that, we have Councillor Swain, Councillor Edwards, Councillor Thompson and Councillor White. Can I have a seconder, please?
Seconded.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Stamp. So places for people liaison committee. So from the chair, I nominate Councillor Swain. Could I have a Conservative nomination, please?
I'll nominate Councillor Durham, because he was on there last time on places to people, I think. So go with that.
Okay. So
yeah, I'm okay with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Durham. So just to confirm, from the chair, place for people liaison committee, I nominate Councillor Swain and Councillor Durham. Can I have a seconder for that, please?
Seconded.
Thank you, Councillor Channer. We then come on to the Essex Coast Recreational Avoidance and Mitigation Strategy Member Forum, and from the chair, I nominate Councillor Lagan. Can I have a seconder for that, please? Thank you, Councillor Stamp. And then finally, we come to the River Crouch Coastal Community Team Management. This is normally the chairman and vice chairman from Strategy and Resources and the chairman and vice chairman for PGA. So obviously PGA will make their own nominations. And from the chair, I will nominate Councillor Siddle and Councillor Skeens. Can I have a seconder for that, please?
Well, I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor Skeens. Councillor Channer.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to say, I did send an email last night. I did attend the River Crouch CCT meeting today, but I did explain the situation and said I was pretty sure I wouldn't be around anymore. And I think obviously they'll get notified in due course, because it used to be the chairman and vice chairman of the committees, actually, for both the main ones, Community Services and P&L, as the order paper depicts.
Yeah, and it has changed to SNR and PG&A. And it has been confirmed that it does not have to be the vice chairman that is nominated to that particular forum. So we now have those nominations. Can I take those via assent?
Agreed.
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 Thank you very much, members. So that is, those positions are now agreed, and therefore I move on to item 13, which is items of business that the chairman of the committee decides are urgent. I have none. So we now move on to item 14, exclusion of the public and press. So I move that the committee resolves that under section 100A(4) of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 1 of part 1 of schedule 12A to the Act, and that this satisfies the public interest test. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
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 Agreed. So Tara, could you please inform us when we are no longer live?